Subscribe now.
Good afternoon or good evening, everyone, depending on where you are in the country. Thank you for tuning in to the Bigfoot Influencers podcast. I'm Tim Halloran. I'm going to apologize again. My beautiful and wonderful co-host, Dana, is not here. She's not feeling well tonight for this recording. So she'll be back smiling next week. So you guys are stuck with me, although you'll be pleased with our guest tonight. So you won't have to worry about me too much. And just again, thank you everyone for joining. We're super appreciative of everyone jumping in and being part of the podcast. Go to Untold Radio AM on YouTube, like and subscribe, drop some comments in. That always helps if you go onto the episodes and drop comments in. That helps us spread the word. If you're on any podcasts, you can find us there too. Like and subscribe, give us a rating, let us know what you think. And we appreciate it. You can always find me and Dana at the bigfootinfluencers.com. And you can find all the links to the podcasts and the YouTube links there as well. So just really quick, Dana and I just returned from a pretty amazing trip to Crypticon, put on by Creepy People Management. They did an awesome job. We just had a fabulous time. I met a ton of people there. I just can't say enough. We just so many of you came out and said hello. You bought some books, which is humbling. I just had tons of great conversations. Met some really, really cool people. So everyone who's listening and was there, thank you. We just had a blast. Dana and I have been talking about it ever since, and met some cool people there. Got to hung out with the Small Town Monsters crew, some of the other podcasters. Strangeology, Bigfoot Society. Just a bunch of people. We just had a blast. It just couldn't, Cliff and Melissa Berkman were there. Matt and Emily Pruitt were there. Got to meet Mark Marcel in person for the first time. So just had a good time. So I just want to say thanks again to the team that put that event on, and we're just happy that we got down there and got to meet everybody. So tonight, I'm really, really, really excited. Our guest is the one and only Thomas Steenberg. For those who may not know Thomas, if you haven't been involved in this, just interested in the subject for that long, Thomas has been, involved in solving this mystery of the hairy man in North America, we'll call it, for I think since 1978. He spent time with all of the early researchers, has some amazing stories with them. He's authored 3 books. And he's considered by me and many, 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 many of the others out there as one of the historians on the subject. He's just a wealth of knowledge. He's just an amazing person. So without any further ado, we're going to bring Mr. Thomas Steenberg into the studio. Thomas, good evening.
Hello, Tim. How are you today?
Oh, I'm amazing. How can I be better? I'm here talking to you. I mean, I wish Dana was here. She's bummed out. She really is. But I'm just thrilled to have you here. So I couldn't be any better. And thank you again for joining us. Thomas was kind enough to have me on his podcast, a couple months ago. So it's just super awesome to have you here. And Thomas hails from British Columbia. Is that correct?
That is correct. Mission, British Columbia.
Awesome. So normally what we do, Thomas, on these podcasts is just kind of like the book. Again, thank you for being part of the book. Not only was Thomas kind enough to allow me to put him in the book, he helped in other ways too. He just was a big champion, and just I can't say enough about all the folks who helped. But the book is really a team effort. It really, I hate to say it's even my book. It's like all of our books, But so Thomas was just an amazing help with that. So, but normally how we start these podcasts off, Thomas, is we'll, like the book, we'll dig in. We'll ask you a few personal questions. I think I have a couple different ones in the book, so I hope I don't catch you off guard. But I know you'll be, with your reflexes, you'll be fine.
Bring it on.
Nothing crazy. So when you were a kid, as a young person, What type of activities were you involved in?
Well, being a good Canadian boy, I was a avid hockey player. I played hockey for like 15 years. Was actually pretty good at it. I could skate like the wind. Could skate as soon as I knew how to walk. But hey, that's the way it was in Canada. And I spent 7 years in the regular army and 1 year in the reserves. And I was quite active when I was younger and stronger and healthier. Pretty Krakatoa at times.
Well, you're still getting out in the woods. I've seen the videos, so you're still out there doing it.
Oh yeah, as often as I can. As often as
So
I can. Still trying to find evidence that we actually share the woods of the Pacific Northwest with an unclassified higher primate, and I still think 90% convinced that this is the case. Yeah.
excellent. So you also served in the military. How long did you do that?
7 years with the regular army, 1st Battalion PPCLI, and before that, I spent a year in the Hastings Infantry Regiment in the reserves, as we call it, the militia up here in Canada. Yep.
Okay. What type of life lessons did you learn from your military background that you carry with you today?
The best thing I learned in the military was outdoor survival skills. I took every survival course they could have, and it was really helpful. Like learning for winter, being out in the middle of nowhere in the wintertime, you learn the key word cold. Right? Cold.
Right.
C. Keep clothes clean. O. Avoid overheating. L. Wear clothes loose and in layers. And D, most importantly, keep clothes dry.
That's great advice just in general for people out there in the woods, because I think you don't, with your body heat, you don't think about that. You sweat during the day and then, what happens at night,
Well, hypothermia is a bitch. So you don't want to get it.
Yeah, I'm happy to be down here in the lower 48, even though it gets a little cold, but not like it does up there. Although I think viruses, my son Danny is he's pretty close to getting his PhD, which we're so proud of him. He was telling me today, because Dana and I have been a little under the weather. He was teaching me about viruses, and he said, in the cold, viruses don't like the cold. So the further north you are, it's harder for them to survive. So it's definitely interesting.
Yes, indeed. Yeah.
Did you and this wasn't one of my, anything crazy happen while you were in the military, or funny with the guys or the battalion, anything that.
Well, I was the oddball. I mean, when we had one of our rare days off, and that wasn't often, it was they go in looking for the bars and they went looking for women. I went into the woods looking for big hairy apes. that was a big difference. I got nothing but ribbing in my time. I mean, most of the guys didn't give a damn about the Sasquatch question at all. They had other priorities. Me, that was just what I did. So I kind of had my own little niche there.
Right. Well, at that, us when we're younger men and women, I'm sure if especially men, we just, we got other things on our mind at that age,
Yeah.
Yeah. How much can we drink? Yeah. Definitely testosterone, all that crazy stuff that we go through as young men. So, I didn't ask you this in the book, but, what does your family and friends think about your interest and fascination in the subject?
Well, I remember when I started being interested, I remember my father telling my mother, "Don't worry, he'll grow out of it." But that didn't happen. I don't know, quite frankly. I don't. They're all on the other side of the country, so as far as I know, most of them are interested, but I don't. They wonder why I am.
Right.
Yeah, but no, for the most part, They said, well, that's interesting, but boy, there are a lot more important things. I mean, that's one of the big differences I always noticed when I started here was the big difference in the public attitude between the United States and Canada.
Okay.
You know, the United States, Bigfoot is everywhere, especially the Pacific Northwest, like where you are in California. There's Bigfoot restaurants selling Bigfoot burgers. Come enjoy our Bigfoot pizza and our Bigfoot drive-in, that kind of thing. Oh, there's a documentary on Bigfoot coming on. We'll watch that. In Canada, it's more or less, oh, Sasquatch. Oh, there's a documentary on the Sasquatch, but the hockey game's on. I'm watching that.
Right. Yeah.
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 Yeah. So
priorities.
the biggest difference I would notice is a difference in the attitude towards the subject as a whole, with the population in general. Yeah.
Well, I think when it comes to sports, there's nationalism. You see many countries, especially now. The World Cup's on currently now, and I think, not that we have avid sports fans in the United States, but it's different, I think. And me being from here, I think that I think some places, they're just, that's just such a huge part of their lives, is their obviously in Canada it's hockey. In some countries it could be soccer or football, whatever they call it. They don't call it soccer across the world, but I think that might be part of it. I mean, we have so many options here in the United States. We have so many sports, and we're so diverse, but we're not. It's a little different. I mean, I don't know if you agree with that.
Well, we have quite a diverse selection up here too, but hockey is the national religion, not just a sport. Yeah, or at least it used to be. For the most part, it still is. Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, as I travel in the Northeast a lot, there's hockey becomes a lot much more prevalent up there. So it is interesting depending on what part of the country you're in down here. So, awesome, Thomas. So I thought we'd start off with something on the subject, and maybe you can share with the audience how the term Sasquatch was coined. And actually, while you do that, I'm going to try to go ahead. I'll let you start talking, and I might try to bring a screen in here and share something as you're talking.
Certainly. Well, the name Sasquatch was coined in 1929 here in Canada. Not too far from where I live is the Chehalis Reserve. And back in the 1920s, a man by the name of J.W. Burns, who was called an Indian agent. He was a white man, but he was classed as an Indian agent. To put it politely, he was a spy for the crown. But he was very sympathetic, and he got to know the native people there in the Chehalis Reserve quite well, and they got to know and trust him. And they started talking to him about their oral history and their oral legends. And he used to write articles for magazines in Canada about life on the First Nations reserves. And he wrote an article that appeared on April Fool's Day, 1929, in Maclean's magazine up here in Canada, an article introducing BC's hairy giants. And he took the Chehalis name, which they pronounce it Saskats or Scratchcats. It all depends on who you talk to and how they pronounce it. The best way to think of it is take the word basket, drop the B in that SAS. But he took their word in this article and he misspelled and he mispronounced it, and he called it Sasquatch. And it's been known as Sasquatch in Canada ever since. And slowly through time, the term Sasquatch drowned out all the other local names. Like, for instance, on Vancouver Island, the term bookwash was used in the media a lot before 1929. And of course, Sonaquah and bookwash on the island, they used the term Mowgli a lot from the Jungle Book. And then Sasquatch just drowned them all out. And of course, this is a number of years before 1957 rolled around and the American term Bigfoot became popular. But I tend to look at it as Sasquatch is the Canadian name and Bigfoot's the American name for the same thing. But that's how the name Sasquatch came about. It was a mispronunciation and a misspelling.
Fascinating. Anytime I hear that, you hear that a different version of that, I'll never forget how you shared it with me. I said, well, they need to talk to Thomas Steenberg about it. And what's amazing about the internet, because I have it shown here to the audience for our listening audience. If you type up J.W. Burns 1929, actually, if you just do that, it'll probably come up. But the article's called "Introducing BC's Hairy Giants." And the internet's fascinating. You can find the actual article that he wrote in 1929, and it's just interesting. I would suggest everyone to jump in. If you're interested in the history of the subject, uh, take a look at it, and it's just fun and fascinating just to see how far back some of this has been documented.
And at the time, you could tell that McLean's magazine really didn't take the subject too seriously, because they decided to put this in their April Fool's Day edition of McLean's magazine.
Right. Yep. Yeah, I think and it continues as a tradition today. I think I saw something this past April that came out on April 1st, and they still. That's April Fool's. So, so you spent some time with the early researchers, and we're going to talk about that a little bit too. After you got out of the military, though, what was your profession, and how did that how did that afford you time to get out in the woods?
Well, I was in the infantry, so when I left, I was the fire controller for the mortar platoon. When I got out in the woods, it was just basically anytime we were off.
Okay.
Right? Anytime we were off. We were in garrison, we were off. And we we're going away on some operation or peacekeeping operation or 6-week-long exercise somewhere. I was in the woods looking for Sasquatch where everyone else was doing other things. But in the military, it was a case of listen here, Corporal Steamer, come here. What are you doing looking for these guys? Blank, blank, blank. Stop. 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 And so when you're in the military, you got to concentrate on what you're doing in the military, or people get hurt. So you don't really think about other things too much. But it helped me a lot, mainly because of survival training and things like that. But you came in a lot handy. And of course, you're younger than you think you're invincible anyway, and you learn very quickly you're not. Yeah, but in the early years, getting out, I started basically in the Alberta foothills of the Rocky Mountains by putting an ad in the local press. And the ad was very simple. Sasquatch. Anyone who believes they've had a sighting of this creature, please contact Thomas Steenberg and the phone number. Remember, there was no home computers then or nothing like that. You did it the old-fashioned way. And I didn't expect much result, but I got to admit, my phone was ringing almost on a daily basis.
Wow.
And one of the best things about that, about the late Professor Vladimir Markotic, who was working at the University of Calgary at the time, a professor of anthropology and archaeology, had a keen interest in this subject. And he saw the article, and he contacted me, and he kind of took me under his wing. And for the first 3 years, we were kind of unofficial partners, because Vladimir was a senior citizen then. He was in his late 70s already.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, and he basically did the academic stuff, and I did the field research. Right. And through him, I got introduced to the late Grover Krantz and became pretty good friends with him. And then on my own, it wasn't too long before I met the late John Green, the late Rennie Dehanan, the late Bob Titmus. And I got to know all these gentlemen, did work with them all. And I wouldn't trade that for anything. I missed them all terribly. And I learned quite a bit. And what I really liked about when I started, we were all zoological.
Right.
All zoological. If the Sasquatch does exist, it's a primate, right? No paranormal connections or space goblins coming out of the wormholes from the fourth dimension, that kind of stuff. We just weren't interested in that. We looked at this as a zoological mystery, and I still do to this day. Yeah.
So what else did you learn? I mean, what are some of the biggest things you learned from the early researchers?
Well, the biggest thing I learned from the early researchers is don't take everything at face value.
Okay.
You have to be. Researchers is really a bad term. I prefer the term investigator because you're kind of like a cop at the crime scene. You're trying to find an answer to something. Eh? You
I'm
know,
learning that as I
yeah,
keep saying it.
you got to.
Yeah.
A lot of the people today, there are a lot of good investigators or researchers,
Mhm.
but there are a hell of a lot more bad ones. And a lot of people today who call themselves researchers, they're not really researchers at all. They're more like religious fanatics trying to push a faith. They act more like a old man at the pulpit trying to convince everybody else that the Sasquatch does exist for whatever they happen to think it is. But as an investigator, you have to be willing to admit that in the end, you could turn out to be wrong. You know, I fully accept the possibility that the Sasquatch may be nothing more than a great piece of Western Canadian or Western North American mythology and folklore. I don't personally believe that, but I accept the possibility. So many other people today uh, call themselves researchers, they're 100% convinced, and they feel it's their job to convince everybody else.
Right.
Right. I personally no longer care if the general public accepts the Sasquatch or not. I do this for one reason only. I want to know. Yeah.
That's fair.
Yeah. I want to know. And proving it to everybody else, that's if I'm ever able to do that, that's a bonus, but it's not a high priority for me anymore. Yeah.
Right. No, that makes a lot of sense, Thomas.
Mhm.
Because we, unless you've seen one, and there are some
Mhm.
witness accounts, how can we just have to go by what by reports and the other types of evidence that we come across.
Yeah. And when it comes to Sasquatch, to me, is there when you're interviewing witnesses and you're talking to someone who claims a sighting, you always got to remember there's only three possibilities here. Only three. One, they saw a Sasquatch. Two, they mistook someone or something for a Sasquatch. Or three, they're lying. And with the great tools we have today, like the internet, I'm afraid number three is more common than anything else.
I think that's what's tough about the internet now is you can see the video or the photo at could look convincing, but unless you just don't know. It's because we're so far advanced.
Well,
It's
absolutely.
frustrating. Yeah.
Any video or still photo where you have to be told what you're looking at,
Right.
the subject in question is
The red
open for
circle. Yeah.
interpretation. Yeah. It has been rendered useless, even if it was a Sasquatch. But that is just my opinion. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, if you shouldn't have to explain what it is.
Yeah. Yeah. If
I
they have to
agree.
tell you what you're looking at, well, then there's nothing there.
Yeah. So you mentioned witnesses. How do you qualify whether you've interviewed a ton of them? How you personally? How do you qualify whether they're credible or not?
The ones that impress me the most are the ones that don't believe it themselves. I have one fellow here who had an incredible encounter back in 2008, and he still doesn't believe in the existence of the Sasquatch. He denies his own eyes. He says, "There's no way this thing can possibly exist. I don't know what I saw. It fits the description of what everybody calls a Sasquatch. I can't think of what else it could be except it was a Sasquatch. But of course, it couldn't have been a Sasquatch because there's no such thing as Sasquatch."
Right.
Some people don't believe their own eyes. And
Yeah.
I'm just
I
looking
think.
at two cases right now from a
Yeah.
retired police officer in the Olympic Peninsula who I will remain nameless for now, who had two encounters and had never told anyone about it. And this last day in the job, he had an incredible encounter, and he still to this day just cannot accept that he saw this thing. And
Right. And
he said something very, very interesting. I learned very early on here in Washington as a police officer, there are two things you never report your superiors: UFOs, monkeys, and Bigfoot.
yeah, definitely. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
not. Yeah, there's plenty of reasons between
Yeah.
on the job harassment. I was funny. We were when Dana and I were down in Kentucky at the Crypticon, and we met a such a nice young man, and I say young because he's younger than me. He's got teenagers, and he was former military. He's in law enforcement now, and but he still gets a ribbon because all the guys in his his group. They know he's the Bigfoot guy, so and he
Yeah.
and he gets a little bit of ribbon here and there, but I think the taboo, it's not as taboo anymore as it used to be with,
That's a problem,
mhm.
because now it used to be when I started, you almost had to pry information from an alleged witness. They were very reluctant to talk because they're afraid of being labeled or called a liar or something like that. I find today with the internet, there are people making up stories just looking for their 15 minutes of fame, and they're making up all kinds of things, and all these silly television programs that have been on, like over the last few years, like Finding Bigfoot. And believe me, there are a lot of programs, as you know as well as I do, that make Finding Bigfoot look like a Smithsonian special. The
Mhm.
best way to describe them is Duck Dynasty looks for Bigfoot. It's just, and there are people there, especially young guys, they're high-fiving me. Hey, let's tell them this story and see if we can get on the show and see if we can fool them. And that goes on, and especially in the United States, I think it's reached epidemic proportions.
Definitely. I think I remember, you mentioning, Finding Bigfoot. I think they used to have to go, scour an area just to make sure people weren't out in the woods, there to hoax them. They would send their producers in early ahead of time, and they wouldn't tell
Well,
anyone where they're going because
they had a
you they
problem. They had a problem in the beginning with people behind the camera. I'm not talking about the cast here, but
Mhm.
behind the camera that were doing things to get them to react and make it more exciting. And the cast put their foot down. They said, we won't tolerate hoaxing, and some people were even fired. So
Yeah, I think they were getting ready to walk
yeah,
out after season 1 because of that. So
yeah,
hats off to those guys for that.
yeah,
So,
yeah.
um, yeah, it's there's entertainment, and they took they didn't want to, yes, they knew they were still elements of it that was entertaining, but they were, like you said, put their feet down there and put this, sunk their heels in the mud and said,
Right.
we're not gonna fake anything, we're gonna just be who we are. So
And that's why I adopted philosophy when I started: stick to the facts and never deviate from the facts. And I've lived by that from the beginning, when I started, and I still live by it. Yep.
yeah, that's, I mean, that's just can't be more simple and clear than that. It makes sense. So, Thomas, going back a little bit with the early researchers, is there what was what was one of the funniest or craziest things that I mean, they were characters, and Peter Byrne's still with us. I think he just
Yeah.
turned 97. But what's one of the? Can you share a funny or crazy story about those guys?
Oh, I could write a book.
You should.
I
Why
mean,
don't you
I
do
could write
that?
a book on this. I mean, one of the things that one of my major achievements I like to say was I was able to be friends and colleagues with all these guys and do work with them all. And I never got sucked into their personal wars, because half the time you couldn't get them in a room together, right? Rennie DeHenden would say, so what does that green think about this or that? I said, and I just tell him, I'm not going to tell you, Renee, and I don't tell him what you said, and I won't tell you what he said. He didn't like it, but he tolerated it, and he never held it against me. And he held it against so many others. I still really don't know why. I loved the late Rennie DeHenden, and we were very good friends. And I always like to say he loved me sometimes. And John Green, well, the last of the old guard I got involved with or I met was Peter Byrne, because I really didn't meet him face to face until 2010.
Oh wow. Okay.
Yeah, yeah. But we exchanged letters and stuff like that. And basically, it was my own fault because John Green was so well known for saying, "If you do anything with Peter Burns, you'll never do anything with me." So I got him on the side because John couldn't stand Peter. I don't know why. I never heard Peter say a bad word about John, but that's all I ever heard from John was bad stuff about Peter Byrne, and all I ever mostly heard from Rennie was bad stuff about everybody.
Well, I think it started off because when Tom Slick, for the audience, Tom Slick was the money behind the research, and he was a millionaire from a Texas oil man, and he funded Peter Burns' expeditions in the Himalaya, search for the Yeti, and then he brought Peter Byrne to North America, where, and correct me here, Thomas, where Renee DeHinden and John Green were leading up the research over here. Is that correct?
Correct. The Pacific Northwest expedition in 1957-58. Tom Slick brought Peter Byrne over. Oh, by the way, Tom Slick spending money, that's a generous term. Rennie always said the only thing he ever supplied was a chainsaw, and it didn't work. We were all buying our own food, using our own vehicles. You know, he may have been a millionaire, but I guess he spent so much money over in the Himalayas, he got a little gun shy by the time of the Pacific Northwest expedition came around. But he brought in Peter Byrne to get some organization because, believe me, Slick was being taken by a lot of shady characters that said they knew this and they knew that, and they were just partying in the woods on his expense.
Mm-hmm.
And Morenia had to go recover a couple of ponies that they had left out there. It was just it turned into an absolute circus. And when Peter Byrne was brought over to lead, well, immediately, if you read Peter's version, he fired them. If you talk to John Green or Rennie DeHinden, they quit.
Right.
Yeah. I don't know what it is. Maybe if it's an old Canadian memory of being cannon fodder for British officers during the Great War. I don't know, But and Peter Byrne is actually Irish, but he sounds like an Englishman,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't know. There was just bad blood from the beginning, and Titmus was involved, and Titmus and DeHinden couldn't stand each other from day one. Titmus always referred to Rennie as that little Swiss oddball, and Rennie always referred to Titmus as the little titmouse. I mean, it was just ridiculous. These men had so much in common, but they just couldn't get along. And how the hell I managed to get involved with them all and not get sucked into their personal war? I gotta admit that was a triumph on my part.
Right. I spoke. Rick Knoll has some similar. He got similar experiences too, because they kind of all pulled him in different directions too. So,
Yeah.
but that's hilarious. No, it is. It's and I yeah. So I think Peter Byrne, starting off, it was. I don't think there's any chance with those relationships, just because the way he was brought in and what he was brought in to do, and there's just always going to be some animosity, I think.
Oh yeah, like Peter tried to organize it. Actually get some organization and chain of command going with the Pacific Northwest expedition. DeHinden, Green, and Titmus just had no interest. Their attitude was, well, we know enough about Sasquatch. What are we doing taking orders from this guy? And it was just bad blood from the beginning. I mean, Peter phoned up John Green's home to ask if he was still going to participate, and June, John's wife, said, well, he won't even talk to you on the phone. That was the end of that.
Wow.
And Rennie just went off on a tirade on him. And so I don't blame Peter for shrugging his shoulders and said, the heck with these guys.
Hey, and I'm gonna hand it to Peter. When I interviewed him for the book, he was very didn't very had nice things to say about the group of them.
Yeah.
So I was digging a little bit, but he was very, very politically correct and was very a gentleman about how he spoke about him. So
Yeah, well, Peter tried to bring some organization. Unfortunately, for the whole thing is Tom Slick died.
Mm-hmm.
And when Tom Slick died, what funding there was dried up, and that was the end of it.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, definitely. So, I, wanted to talk about witness multi-person. One of the things that fascinates me is multi-person daytime witness sightings.
Mm-hmm.
And have you been involved, in any of those reports or interviews, talking to folks that have had that happen?
Oh, multiple witnesses, where they corroborate each other. Yeah, that's happened on occasion, not often, but it does happen.
Yeah, I mean, what do you say to that? I mean, how do we say, that they all mistook something?
Well, it's easy. You just say it. You're online. You're all mistook. What are they going to do? It's not like they can produce the thing,
Right,
Like one of the
right.
most interesting cases I ever looked at was the Crandall Campground incident of May long week in 1988, where we had 4 witnesses, and there was possibly actually 7, because there are 3 people in another truck that I was never able to track down. They all confirmed with each other, and one of them even insisted going to the park warden's office to write out a written report. In Canada, in the national park, they're called wardens, not rangers.
Okay.
And he went to the park warden's office and insisted on writing out a report, even though they were willing to just let it go with the, okay, you reported to us, thank you very much. And Alan Debb, the warden at the time, he told me that he did everything he could to try and convince these people it must have been a bear they saw, but they would have none of it. And I interviewed all 4 of them separately, and they basically confirmed there were little differences, like what 2 of the witnesses thought was 80 feet away, others thought it was 100 feet away, blah, 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 that kind of thing. But other than that, it was 4 witnesses who saw something incredible, and they were just dying to look into it more. Yeah. Yeah, that's happened on occasion. Another interesting case was 2 separate sightings by 2 different people on the same stretch of Forest Service Road, only basically a kilometer apart, 4.5 hours apart.
Wow, and they didn't know each other.
And they didn't know each other. Yeah, they had no idea of each other. And I was able to interview them both, and found out through one that he thought his sighting was the following evening. It turned out it was 4.5 hours before. So it's quite possible that if that they saw the same animal. Can't say that with 100% certainty, but it's a fair bet. Yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So, yeah, that's just compelling. I mean, that's just always, I chatted with Bob and Kathy Strain, and they had they and 2 other individuals were actually in what they call Area X down in southeast Oklahoma, with the North American Wood Ape Conservancy, and they had a daytime sighting of 2 of them, the 4 of
Mm-hmm.
them, and I just scratched my head. I said,
Mm-hmm.
because we talked, it is there's there's a lot of people. If it's one person, you can say, well, it could have been a bear, it could have been a mistaken identity, it could have been, who knows. But when you just have a daytime sighting, and multiple people, and then there's nothing in it for them to really to make that up. So that just compels me when I hear those types of stories.
Yeah, and John Winona Kirk more recently in 2017, right at the gate to Sasquatch Provincial Park. They were just stopped there waiting for a friend to join them, because 2 American researchers were up with them, and they were going up the hill, and they saw something moving in the trees in the hill above them. They told me about it, went out with them a few days later, and we found the tracks. Cast 2 of them. So it's hard to really dismiss something when you have 5 different people, all Sasquatch researchers, saying they saw this darn thing.
Right.
Yeah.
So obviously, one of your goals is hopefully to solve the mystery and see one of these things. How if you decide to hang up your hat and retire, and without seeing one, are you going to be okay with that?
Well, I probably won't hang up my hat unless I have to. If you'd asked me back in 1979, would we still be looking in 2022? I said, no, come on, you're crazy.
Right.
Yeah. So No, I just hope I find I know the answer before I pass away, and if I don't, um, I'll make this vow. If there's any way to come back and let you know, I will do it. Well, I like to think Rennie, John, and Grover and Vladimir, they all know the answer now. So give me one of them ghost calls and just let me know. All right.
Right,
Now,
right.
I'll keep it a secret. I won't even tell you anybody. Lying. Yeah. Just let me know. But no, like I said, I've basically I'm into this now to try to convince myself whether or not it's true. I also want to know if it's not true. If there is nothing and it is just myth and mythology, I want to know that. I don't know how you'd ever prove it. I had an idea some years ago. I called it the Coca-Cola Project, but I don't have $1 million to throw away. So it's your Coca-Cola Highway that runs between Merritt and Hope here in the west parts of British Columbia. They've got wildlife fences all along because they built that highway during 1986. And they put tunnels for wildlife to get through. If we could cover those tunnels, including the creek and river tunnels, anything big enough for a man to get through 24/7, 365 days a year for enough space and period of time, and we get footage of every large animal we know is there, but we don't get footage of a Sasquatch, so that would convince me that the Sasquatch is myth and mythology.
Interesting.
Yeah. But again, and that's one of the biggest things that bother me, because in Banff National Park, they've had the similar thing with overpasses and wildlife tunnels since the mid 1990s. And they have been covering those ones with cameras, but they're not 365 days a year. They put them out a week here, a week there,
Okay, right.
at this tunnel or that tunnel. But since the mid 1990s, they have footage of everything you can think of. Everything, including some strange people. But guess what? They don't have any footage of.
Right.
Right. And that really bothers the hell out of me. The only out is the cameras aren't permanent. But it's getting to be a slim one.
Right, right. Yeah. So I mean, do you have your days, Thomas, when you say, you know what, these things aren't real?
About 9 times a day.
Yeah.
And then I talk myself out of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm just an enthusiast. I'm not an investigator or researcher, but and I haven't been involved with it that long. But I do that too. Sometimes I just think, is this really real?
Yeah. Well, I look at it this way: if the Sasquatch does not and never did exist, then I've done my part to catalog a great piece of Western North American mythology and folklore, and that alone makes it worth researching and studying. If it does exist, of course, it's a zoological discovery of the 21st century.
Right. It's fascinating. I mean, how much,
Yeah.
How many First Nations and Native American tribes have it in their history? It's definitely fascinating.
It is.
And then around the world, I talked to Dr. Esteban Sarmiento, and I'm sure Dr. Sarmiento, and he's studied apes, and he's a primatologist, and he doesn't say, he says, unless I see one, I'm not going to believe it. But he said there's something to the thousands and thousands and thousands of reports all around the world, not just in North America, of people seeing a bipedal, hairy, whatever looks like a primate. So there's something to it. He said,
just put it quite simply: if there is no Sasquatch and never was, every single incident is either mistaken identity or a lie.
Right.
All of them. Every footprint is a fake or a misidentification. That means none of it is true.
And that's tough to rationalize.
Yeah. That is tough to rationalize. Yeah.
I think not that we ever try to convince someone who doesn't believe in it to believe in it, but I think if anyone asks, that's typically what I come back with. I say, look, you've got thousands and thousands of reports, eyewitness accounts. You've got the First Nation and Native American traditions, and all it takes is one of these eyewitness reports or one of those footprint trackways or casts to be real. So you can't say that all. Are you saying that every single one of them are hoaxed?
Absolutely. And unfortunate reality is it will remain in this Does it or doesn't it? I mean, we're still basically at stage one. Does it or does it not exist?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it'll remain that way until science gets what science has always demanded, and that is a body or piece of body with sufficient skeletal remains. It wouldn't surprise me if the day comes and the Sasquatch is laid out on the table. It's going to be found in the bush by a group doing a study that's got nothing to do with Sasquatch. It's going to be, anthropologists doing a grizzly study or some darn thing.
Mm-hmm.
Or some anthropology student's going to come across a dust-covered desk, drawer, or box in the basement of a museum somewhere, or something that was turned in the 1950s, and say, "What the heck is this?" It wouldn't surprise me at all. Maybe we should be going to the museums and the institutions like Smithsonian and say, "Show us your dad."
I think I've heard you mention that in the past.
They don't even know what they got. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So do you think we've gotten, since the 1967 Patterson-Gimlin film, do you think we've gotten any closer to proving it?
Not closer, but it's still intriguing. There's still a few pieces of footage that I would like to know a lot more about. Like the Port Renfrew video footage from 2013 on Vancouver Island. The Jebediah State Park, I believe it was 1993. And there's one skunk ape video where it apparently goes after a snake. That's pretty intriguing to me. I'd like to know a lot more about them, but there's nothing that's happened to Patterson-Gimlin film quality.
Right.
Yeah, and we could spend a whole show talking about the PG film. Yeah.
I know. Yeah, I may have to put that in my back pocket for you for another one.
Yeah.
But it's fascinating. Yeah, there's even days you look at that and you just there's just talking to some individuals that that I interviewed for the book, yourself included. They the most consensus is there's not enough there to prove that it exists, and there's not enough there to prove that that was a hoax.
Right.
So
you can't prove it either way. Really,
right.
It's an enigma. It's still there. And of course, any kind of video or photo evidence, no matter how clear it is, it may get some, if you're talking about zoology and anthropology, professional science, it may get them shaking their heads and asking questions, but it'll never prove it. Science needs what science has always demanded, and that's something to lay out on the table that can be examined and re-examined. And even then, it'd be a slow merry-go-round process. It's not like they're going to go on the next day and say, Sasquatch is real. No, they got to confirm that. Is this just a freak or isn't it? And then some politician will go, gee, do we need to protect these things? And then that merry-go-round will start.
Right.
That's just the way it works. Yeah. It's just science gets what science demanded, and no amount of politically correct wishful thinking will ever change that, because that's just the way it works.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. You hear stories of the hunters that have something, they claim to have one in their scope, and they can't pull the trigger because it looks too human-like.
Which is rather odd, because humans shoot humans every day.
Yeah, well, that's true. It's a good point.
Yeah.
But I guess that maybe they're not hunters doing that. But so I know you mentioned wanted to get your opinion personally on my book, The Bigfoot Influence, has been released, and just you were a huge part of it, and thank you again so much for just couldn't have done it without you. But what do you think of the concept? I mean, of the book? Was it what you expected?
I haven't seen the book yet. I don't even know where I can order a copy from.
I thought I sent you one. So here's the book. I thought I thought I sent you one, Tom. So I'm sorry.
No.
Yeah.
Tim,
oh my gosh.
You have not.
Uh-oh. Now I'm on the spot. Everyone. Yeah. Well, the funny thing is,
I will pick up a copy as soon as I can find one somewhere. But I think the concept is very good. It's been done before to a lesser extent, but hell, there's enough out there. You could probably write a part 2.
Yeah, that's why we put volume 1 on it, because there's definitely I mean, we mentioned a couple here already. John and Winona Kirk. There's just so many people out there that I could include, but the book would be massive if I did that. So that was my thought, is I would break it down. So I want to ask you a question, because this is always a controversial question. The title of the book's The Bigfoot Influencers. So to me, an influencer is somebody that has impacted the subject, from a historical standpoint, or has just played a role in how others look at the subject. So where do you stop at an influencer? I know you're strictly biological and zoological, and that's where I plant my feet.
Mhm.
Um, although there's a lot of individuals that think otherwise, but they've bending people's ears, and they've got a lot of people listening to them. So what are your
Yeah,
thoughts on?
there are no. We used to use the term in the back in the old days, the lunatic French. I now call them the inmates running the asylum. People who have paranormal views of what the Sasquatch is and things like that. Some more extreme than others, but they're no less an influencer on the subject as a whole than I am. You know, they they build up interest.
Hmm.
They get people asking questions, and who knows? I'm not naive enough to think I'm perfectly right. It may be they're right and I'm wrong, and I'm the boob because I stuck to a zoological approach, and I should have been more open-minded. Should have used my third eye.
Right.
I don't buy that, but yeah, who knows? Maybe it turns out they're right, because I don't deny the existence of the paranormal. I don't deny the existence of UFOs or other mysteries out there. I just don't think they're in any way associated with the Sasquatch mystery. But who knows? Maybe I'm wrong. So
Right.
they're no less an influencer than I am. I mean, uh, a lot of guys who I have respect for, they're more into the paranormal side of things, and we
Hmm.
still get along. We have big, long debates that never seem to go anywhere because neither one of us will change our position. But
Right.
it's good to have them. It's good to have them. No, they're no less than any more of an influencer than I am. No more, no less. I mean, they influence people to think, and that's never really a bad thing.
Right. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
refreshing, because that's my approach. I mean, obviously in the first book, there's more um biological, flesh and blood individuals in the book than there are not.
As it
Um, and,
should be.
and but like you said, I mean, how can I say who's an influencer or not? It's not me to judge that. It's
Mm.
so, and then and I can feel how I feel, but maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah. I mean, who knows? It could turn out to be the Sasquatch is a paranormal life force creature from the fourth dimension that pops through wormholes and communicates telepathically from the top of Mount Hood and love vibes, like Lapsaritis used to say. I'm totally wrong and he's totally right. But I will never ever admit to that unless you prove it to me.
Right.
Yeah, yeah. But who
That's
knows?
fair.
I'll I'm only 90% convinced of the Sasquatch's existence, but I keep 10% wrong off in case I'm wrong.
Yeah, if
Yeah,
without so as you said that, Thomas, without the PG film, the Patterson Gimlin film, where would you be?
85, 90.
Okay.
Yeah, the biggest thing in the last few years is what I said earlier about the wildlife crossings in the
Hmm.
national parks. I really have a hard time with that. Why hasn't something like this been picked up yet?
Right.
Yeah, it really makes no sense. Yeah, because Banff National Park, when I was in Alberta, almost half the reports I looked into were in the park. Hell, the warden's officer used to give me a call when someone reported something strange.
Oh wow. Okay.
Yeah, yeah. I had reports of creatures in the highway. For the most part, the eastbound lanes and westbound lanes are divided by a line of trees, right?
Hmm.
Like there's forest in between. I had reports of creatures right on in between.
Hmm.
I looked into a number of them over the years. Then they built the wildlife fences and they ground to a halt. There's still reports from the park, but not on the highway anymore.
Well, that's interesting itself in
Yeah,
itself.
yeah.
Yeah, Because how would
Yeah.
a witness know just not
But
to make a report about that
they
with
they have to
potential?
cross the highway too, north and south. They have to
Right.
cross the highway too, and just like everything else does. And they have covered these wildlife crossings to the point that they know that when they were first built, grizzly bears that were alive wouldn't go near them. They wouldn't use them.
Right.
But bears born and weaned since their construction have no problem with them.
Hmm.
They know that through the studies they've done. And it
Right.
just bothers the heck of me. I mean, everything you can think of, everything from a ground squirrel to a moose to grizzly bear, they've got pictures and footage using these overpasses and tunnels, but not Sasquatch.
That's interesting.
Yeah, it is interesting.
So has anything weird happened to you while you've been out in the woods?
Well, the one time I may have actually seen one, and like I said, I stick to the facts, every deed in the facts, was March of 2004. I saw a figure close to a mile away in a cut line where the big power lines go through, walk from the center of that cut line to the trees on the right-hand side. Remember, I stick to the facts, never deed in the facts. The facts are I saw a figure. He was jet black in color, appeared to be walking upright. But it's also a fact it was too far away to see details, so I can't say with 100% certainty that wasn't a really big, weird-looking man way up there.
Mm-hmm.
You know, but if he was a man, he was huge. I mean, this thing, as I remember, was big even for a Sasquatch. If that was a Sasquatch, I have actually seen one. If it wasn't, I still have not. Yeah.
Interesting. So, if what advice would you have for new people who want to investigate or research the subject?
My best advice is to adopt the motto that I've lived by: stick to the facts and never deviate from the facts, and never go off in the wild speculation.
Okay, that's
Okay.
great advice.
And there's one golden rule, one major golden rule: thou shalt not hoax ever for any reason. Because you do, you get caught, your credibility is gone forever.
You know, that's just a life lesson. I mean, it's just we tell the truth in life. You know, it's beyond Bigfoot, in my opinion. Just do the right thing. So you've authored a few books. What books would you suggest if I was just getting involved in the subject? What kind of books? What would you suggest me read?
Oh, the Bigfoot influencers, right?
Well, I wasn't leading you that. I didn't mean that book, but thank you for that. I appreciate that.
To me, the two Bibles are Sasquatch Apes Among Us by the late John Green, and the Abominable Snowman Legend Come to Light by Ivan T. Sanderson, published in 1961. Of course, any book by one Thomas Steenberg is a damn fine read, too.
Yes.
Yeah.
Definitely. That's good advice too. So what else would if I was gonna get involved, what else can you tell us? Should I get in the woods? Should I join a group? How would I get started? And just where would I start?
Questions. Ask
Okay.
questions, and don't be afraid to ask questions. Be like a police officer in a crime investigation. You're trying to find out the facts. Don't be afraid to ask questions.
Awesome.
Don't
Well,
take
Thomas,
don't take anybody the word for it, and don't dismiss them out of hand either. Ask questions.
did you have pre-coined? I'm sure you modified them over the years. The types of questions you ask.
Oh yeah, I've used the same questionnaire since the beginning. I've added to it, of course, but yeah, I've used the same one.
So maybe if you're willing, when I get to volume 2 of the book, maybe we'll put that in the book and we'll share that with the readers.
Absolutely.
That would be fun.
Anybody wants a copy of them, I'll send it to you. No problem.
That's cool. That's great. So as we recap the episode, what's next for Thomas Steenberg? I know you're going to write a book. I just going to talk you into writing a book about the early researchers. I think that could be a hit.
You're not the first to suggest that. Yeah.
So what's next for you?
Well, right now it's I got to tell you, this year was rather slow report wise, and most of the ones I did look at turned out to be nothing. A couple of so-called tracks. I mean, it's amazing what shapeless holes people think are Sasquatch tracks nowadays. But for the most part, it's been rather slow. I'm hearing more from people who saw things, telling me about what they saw 10 years ago, 15 years ago, things like that. I'm wondering if in this particular area of British Columbia, the Lower Mainland, last year at this time, we were devastated by torrential flooding and mudslides all over the place. I mean, whole mountainsides came down. I mean, every highway out of here we were cut off. I'm wondering if that may have had an effect on any local population of this creature, because so far this year, there's been next to nothing. Though there was 2 interesting cases where they were all willing to talk, and then they just suddenly decided, no, I don't want to get involved in this anymore. I'm going to shut up. And that's happened.
Yeah, that's fascinating.
You always get people saying, "Oh, I saw 15 Sasquatch here. I seen 15. I see 3 every week." I just dismiss that stuff out of hand, and don't bother with them anymore. But the most intriguing thing is going out and actually physically looking, and I do a lot of that. Checking for evidence of the creature's presence. And that's creek beds, lake shores, things like that. Spots where something may step and leave a footprint behind, things like that. And of course, you always carry a camera with you. If you're camping in a campground, you got to get up at 4 o'clock in the morning and go to the outhouse. Take your camera with you. Because if you don't, you see this thing and you don't get a picture of it. You're just another person who says you saw a Sasquatch, and we already got a vast collection of that.
Yeah, definitely. There's it's a still compelling story, but if you can't do anything with it,
Yeah.
It's so if someone wanted to send you a report or contact you, how would they do that?
Well, they can email me directly at sasquatch@telus.net. They can contact me on my Facebook page. I also have a blog site, www.thomassteenberg.com.
Excellent. Well, Thomas,
by the way, my phone number is 604-826-6150. I don't mind giving it out. I get enough weird calls anyway, so it doesn't matter.
Well, there you have it, folks. I think that might be a first, someone sharing their phone number on, to the audience. So hats off to you, Thomas, for that. So this has been a pleasure. I can't wait to get you back. I think we're gonna do one just on the Patterson Gimlin film, and maybe we'll just dive into that one episode, and Dana will be back and healthy by then, I'm sure. So I just thank you again for taking part. I appreciate your time here, and it's always such a pleasure just to chat with you, Thomas.
Thank you, Tim. Enjoyed it.
Thank you so much. I'll talk to you soon. All right, folks. That's the one and only Mr. Thomas Steenberg. Thank you again for joining us today or tonight, again, wherever you are. Don't forget to go to Untold Radio AM. Check us out on YouTube, any podcast platform, like and subscribe. Go to thebigfootinfluencers.com. You can drop us a note. You can reach out to us if you have a report or a story you want to share. Even if we don't, we'd like to hear some of those, and we're going to put some of those on the podcast here in future, because we'd like to hear from you. So again, Dana will be back with us next episode, I hope. So thank you guys for tuning in, and we will see you next week. Thanks again. Take care.